What would you do if I told you that the only obstacle between you and financial success is not in your bank account, not in your job, not even in your connections, but in a single idea that you have yet to understand? Today, I want to share with you the story of how Tony Robbins, one of the most influential leaders in personal development and finance, went from living in absolute poverty to building a multi-million-dollar empire. But make no mistake, it was not luck or a magic formula. Everything changed the moment he understood something so simple and powerful that it transformed his life in an instant. What was it? That same revelation is about to be yours. But before we get there, I want you to think about this. Why do some people achieve success against all odds, while others, with all the resources in the world, never get ahead? The answer lies in this story, and believe me, you won't want to miss a single second. Imagine this. A 17-year-old boy trapped in the monotony of life he did not choose. Tony Robbins lived in a small, run-down apartment, a place he could barely call home. The walls were thin, the pipes creaked, and cold air seeped into the broken windows. Each day felt the same as the last, and every night he spent washing dishes at a local restaurant. While hot water splashed against his hands and the clatter of dishes filled the air, Tony watched the clock on the wall, wishing time would move faster. The only thing he had in abundance were excuses. I wasn't born into a rich family. I don't have the right connections. I'm not lucky. But deep down there was something more, a small whisper, a voice that said, "This can't be all there is. There has to be something more for me." One night, after an exhausting shift, Tony returned to his apartment. It was dark and cold. He opened the door and saw an envelope on the floor. His heart raced instantly. He knew what it was. As he opened it, the bill he couldn't pay seemed to mock him. He looked around, the old, worn-out couch, the few pieces of furniture he had, and he felt a heavy weight in his chest. It was as if the world was telling him to give up. Tony collapsed onto the couch, burying his head in his hands. At that moment, something changed. It wasn't a grand epiphany, but a feeling of exhaustion. He was tired of feeling trapped, of being a victim of his circumstances. He looked toward the table, where there was an old book someone had given him months ago, one he had never opened. With determination, he picked it up and began to read. That night marked the beginning of something different. Tony decided that even though he had no money or resources, he was going to seek answers. He spent the next few weeks devouring books in the public library. He didn't have enough money to buy them, so he stayed late reading everything he could about personal development, success, and wealth. One day, while flipping through a newspaper, he saw an ad for a personal development event. The ticket cost more than he could afford, but something inside him screamed that he had to be there. He sold one of the few valuable things he had, a watch his grandfather had given him, and bought the ticket. When he arrived at the event, he felt out of place. The room was filled with people who seemed to have everything under control. Elegant suits, expensive watches, confident smiles. But then, the keynote speaker took the stage. It was Jim Rohn, a man whose energy filled the entire room. Jim began with a phrase that resonated in every fiber of Tony's being. It's not what you have that defines you. It's what you do with what you have. Tony couldn't look away. Every word Jim spoke felt like it was directed straight at him. At that moment, something clicked. It wasn't about waiting for circumstances to change, nor about luck or having more money. It was about transformation, about becoming someone who deserved more. At the end of the event, Tony approached Jim. Although he was nervous and unsure what to say, he simply expressed his gratitude. Jim smiled at him and said something Tony would never forget. Change begins with you, but only if you're willing to do the work. That day, Tony went home with something more valuable than money. He had clarity. He knew he couldn't change his past, but he could change his future. And so began his journey to success, a journey that started in desperation but led him to discover his true power. Tony knew that the revelation he had at Jim Rohn's event wasn't going to change his life overnight, but he also understood that true change wasn't a one-time event, but a series of small actions repeated every single day. And that was exactly how his transformation began. Every morning, Tony woke up early, even when his body begged him to stay in bed. He sat down with a book in his hand and spent 30 minutes reading about personal development, leadership, or finance. He didn't do it just to learn, but to feed his mind with new ideas that countered the limiting beliefs he had accumulated over the years. Every page gave him more clarity, more purpose, and most importantly, more confidence that change was possible. At night, after a long day, instead of giving in to exhaustion, he took out his notebook and wrote down his goals. At first, they were simple things: save a little money, learn a new skill, or attend another personal development event. But over time, his goals became more ambitious. He began to envision himself as someone who could inspire others, as someone who could build a life he had never thought possible. One day, while talking with his mentor, he anxiously asked, "Jim, where do I start? What's the first thing I should do to change my life?" Jim, with his characteristic wisdom, replied, "Do more than what you're paid to do. Be excellent, even when no one is watching." Those words resonated deeply with Tony. Up until that moment, he had done the bare minimum to survive, but now he understood that excellence wasn't a public act, but a private habit. From that moment on, he decided to give his best in everything, not because someone was watching, but because he knew that every action he took was shaping the person he was becoming. Slowly, opportunities started to appear. He got better jobs because people began to notice his dedication. With the little savings he had, he enrolled in more events, invested in courses, and most importantly, started surrounding himself with people who were also working on their growth. Now, take a moment and think about your own life. Stop and ask yourself, are you acting like the person who deserves the success you dream of? Or are you still waiting for circumstances to magically change for you? The truth is harsh but liberating. If you're not working on yourself, you are settling for less than what you could have. Tony Robbins understood this in his darkest moment. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but he learned that every change begins with a decision. That decision was to commit to becoming someone better, and now you can make that decision too. The time to start is not tomorrow, not next month, but now. Success doesn't wait, and neither should you.